Just a couple of minutes. Right now, back to the subject of the American Health Care Act and whatever it was that went down on Friday that caused it to not even get voted on. We're joined right now by Rachel Bovard, who's the Director of Policy Services for the Heritage Foundation. Rachel, welcome back into the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what'd you think Friday afternoon? Were you surprised that the vote got pulled?
I don't think, many Washington watchers were that surprised after, you had observed what had gone on for most of the day, which is that, basically Paul Ryan stopped negotiating with the Freedom Caucus, and they had a number of members that said, they needed certain requirements in the bill to vote for it. But more than that, there were a bunch of moderates that refused to support the bill as well for changes they wanted that they didn't get. So there was broad opposition to the bill throughout the GOP conference, and the result of that is you don't have the vote. You got to work with your membership to get a bill like this across the finish line.
There was certainly blame to go around. I wanted to read President Trump's tweet from this weekend. It said, Democrats are smiling in D.C. that the Freedom Caucus, with the help of the Club for Growth and Heritage, have saved Planned Parenthood and Obamacare. So even got a little dig in at Heritage there.
Yeah, and I can understand why he's frustrated. Look, this is a campaign promise he wanted to keep, but unfortunately it wasn't implemented correctly. And to be honest, his tweet also doesn't reflect the fact that there was a lot of moderate opposition to this bill. The Tuesday group, which is the group of moderates in the House, is very active in opposing it. Chair of the House Appropriations Committee didn't even support it. So there was a number of constituencies that weren't satisfied. And again, that's what happens when you write a bill behind closed doors and you don't take into account the very serious concerns of a lot of people in your conference.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what the way forward is here, because this is my understanding of how things went down. The Freedom Caucus went in and said we want these essential benefits deleted, done away with, and they agreed to include that in the bill. And then they also wanted things like the guaranteed coverage for pre-existing conditions to be removed, and some other things, and that's kind of when the people who are on the more moderate side of things, I guess some people would refer to them as, started getting cold feet, and they didn't want to move forward with parts of it. So I'm wondering, where is the middle ground on this? I mean, if they try to take another run at this, how in the world are they going to satisfy the people that don't want the pre-existing conditions and some of these other things, and get the moderates in the Republican Party to vote for it?
Well, to be clear, the moderate opposition began, weeks before the essential health benefits were on the table. They just simply did not like how the bill treated, or how they felt the bill treated some coverage options.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, all of these members, most of the members serving today in Congress have voted for repeal. They have voted for full repeal. Most recently in 2015, when the bill passed the House and the Senate. So they've all put their votes on the line when they didn't think it was actually going to pass.
Exactly.
And so you're seeing a lot of hypocrisy at this point. But we've always said at the Heritage Foundation, look, repeal it first. And then if there are elements that you like, if there are elements that the American people decide that they want, such as, covering pre-existing conditions, which the employer market already does, keeping people on plans till 26, you can implement those provisions, but you have to repeal it first. You've just seen what happened when they tried to repair and keep portions of the bill in place. I mean, CBO scored it poorly, the policies were poor, and the bill didn't get support. You have to repeal first before you can start replacing elements of the plan that you like, and also implementing free market reforms that will make healthcare more affordable. So you've worked on Capitol Hill long enough to understand how this works a lot better than I do. You worked for who? Mike Lee, is that correct? I worked for Mike Lee, Pat Toomey, Rand Paul, and then I was also in the House of Representatives for several years. Right.
So as I understand the Affordable Care Act, let me step back for a minute. As I understand how that was written, it was basically 1,200 pages of addendums to existing laws in large part, correct? I mean, a lot of it was written so that it corrects subset C of whatever this particular law was when it dealt with insurance regulations and all that. So if you just erased all of it overnight, what about the argument that it would throw the healthcare system into an uproar because nobody would know what to do if you didn't get it replaced quickly enough?
Well, two things. First, the insurers have said, look, we're fine with moving to a replacement plan. We've got this. But to your point about, what would happen, the last repeal bill that they passed contained a 2-year phase out. So it wasn't, we pass repeal, and then suddenly there's no coverage for anyone.
Okay.
If that bill passed, Obamacare would remain in place for 2 years, giving Congress time to implement a replace plan. And yeah, you do want to give them a deadline, right? Because it's Congress. They don't act if they don't have a deadline. But that bill had a 2-year phase out to allow for this robust, transparent debate about what would replace it.
See, that's information I didn't have, and I think that's something maybe they should have talked about a little more, because I think that might have scared some folks, particularly with 2018 rolling around, and a lot of them are going to have their jobs on the line again. Democrats take back control of the House or the Senate, and this is a whole different ballgame.
No, that's right. And the Republicans have always had a difficult time messaging on this issue. And, it's hard. With Democrats, it's very easy for them to be super hyperbolic and the sky is falling all the time. It's a little bit harder to make the rational argument that says, no, we're going to fix this. It has a 2-year phase out. We're going to get this right. But that doesn't change the fact that it needs to be done. They've made this promise. It's too big to walk away from. They have to repeal this law. Interesting.
Well, I'm thrilled to get your input on it, because, I kind of looked at better or worse. I was afraid that if Paul Ryan was threatening to walk away from this and just leave Obamacare in place, it could take a year, it could take 2 or 3 years for that thing to completely collapse, at which point you may find yourself negotiating with Democrats to try to get something back in place. I was pretty alarmed by that. So
I think that's right. I think the urgency is there. The opportunity is there to write a better bill now, and they just need to, walk through the door. They need to do this.
Let's hope that they do. Rachel Bovard from the Heritage Foundation. Go to heritage.org to read more of their thoughts on this. I appreciate your time on this Monday.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Good to be with you.
Have a great day. Thank you. So maybe that gives you a little more insight into where the Heritage and the Freedom Caucus folks were coming from. They want it jettisoned, and then you got a 2-year window of the phase out to actually build the replacement plan, where you can pick and choose what you want, but everything else is gone to begin with. So that's information that was news to me. I had not heard anybody else report that. So, I think that might have been key. That might have been a key argument for some people. But we'll see where it goes. It's going to take some talking, that's for sure. And with what we're 7, 8, 10 months away from people starting to campaign for their next reelection campaign. So you would think they'd all see the urgency in trying to get this thing figured out. We're starting to get alerts here from this news conference that's underway. And fortunately, Frank Ladd, our associate producer, is back there turning around some sound for us. Liz, why don't we see if we can get to his comments on Maryland, who we talked about Maryland deciding, even in the wake of what's happened at this Rockville High School with these 2 illegals who raped a young girl, Maryland still announced it wanted to become a sanctuary state. Let's go ahead and get to cut number 17, please.
Well, Maryland is talking about a state law to make the state a sanctuary state. The governor is opposed to that, I'm glad to hear. That would be such a mistake. I would plead with the people of Maryland to understand that this makes the state of Maryland more at risk for violence and crime, that it's not good policy. And as a former prosecutor for many years in state and federal law in jurisdictions, I just know the historic relationship different federal agencies have with regard to honoring detainers. It's just a fundamental principle of law enforcement that if you have a person arrested and another jurisdiction has a charge, then they file a detainer, and when you finish with the prisoner, you turn them over to the next jurisdiction for their adjudication.
And clearly, if Maryland's a sanctuary state, do they quit doing that? If they do, I want them held responsible for it, is how I would see that going forward. We've got a couple of more of these clips from the Attorney General, who just announced that he's going to punish these cities who choose to remain in sanctuary status by pulling some